28, 2018. Random date. I specifically remember it because that's the day I saw a very graphic picture that didn't mean much to a lot of people. It was when Amber Peterson also saw that picture. What she saw was her 7-year-old daughter, Brooklyn, brought the iPad to her, and what she saw was the daughter's avatar was getting sexually harassed by 2 other male avatars. I was the head of security at Linden Lab and was in charge of 2 virtual economies. We were building VR platform. And then my former boss from Facebook was the trust and safety advisor, the head of security at Roblox. So this was very close to home. And yet, a lot of parents didn't realize that that's going to be a concern for them in 2018. So anyone who thinks that that avatar being molested in the historical form and now this whole like hype of metaverse coming at us, I think it's time to pause. And that's why we're here to talk about child safety and security in this very gigantic ride that's coming. It's this wave that's sweeping our industry, taking us into the next iteration of the internet. Since then, a lot of things have really changed, and together with me, there are a lot of advisors and people who really have become more and more concerned. The headlines are becoming more graphic. I even heard about children being exposed to virtual striptease. That's the thing. In the metaverse, you can't unsee things. In virtual world, once children are exposed to these graphic material, you can't undo the damage. So that's why, together with me, I'm just really honored to create this 20-minute session to pause and reflect as to how are we going to tackle this as we move fast towards these advanced technologies. I'm Kavya Pearlman, and I'm the founder and CEO of XR Safety Initiative, Xrsi. And together with me, and I'm trying to find our slide, sorry. Together with me is Kai, who is also a founder and CEO. I'll let Kai introduce herself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kai Frazier. I'm the founder and CEO of KaiXR, where we make safe pathways to the metaverse for kids.
Thank you, Kai. So what is Metaverse? For Xrsi, we look at the metaverse in different stack in modular forms. Why? We look at it holistically because that's only how you're going to be able to tackle safety and security. But you have to sort of divide it into sort of a modular forms to address each vertical. So the way we look at it is from a risk perspective. And risk, which is twofold. Like in the traditional media, I'm a cybersecurity professional, and that's kind of the way I look at things is like, how is the bad guy going to do things? So in the traditional media, the attack surface has only been like your nodes, your networks, your server. But in this immersive media, in the metaverse, you have a human in the loop, and you have your society in the loop. And those two are seriously important considerations that, nodes, network, server doesn't cover it. So we have to look at it holistically. In the metaverse, you have the infrastructure. That's where a lot of the risk could lie, network, nodes, infrastructure type related risk. But then people are creating content. That's where the risk comes from. Connecting with people, and that's where the incidents of safety, sexual harassment, all this bullying and grooming. Then there is payment related concerns. As soon as you introduce money, hackers and fraud and money laundering, all these things happen. And then there are tons of use cases, which is great use cases, but this is why we're looking at it holistically, because we want to build trust in this ecosystem that's emerging and evolving. Use cases are amazing. You can do immersive education, entertainment. I mean, the list is endless, and I'm sure you guys may have heard of some of these use cases, like travel, you know. But, and I'll just say that.
Sure. So once again, good afternoon. A little bit about my background. I've been a teacher for a very long time. I've worked in education for about 20 years, and we're used to digital domains posing a threat for children, but when it got to virtual reality and XR, a lot of those threats were expanded. In VR, we're sharing virtual spaces, but just like a classroom, we see a lot of instances with kids being harassed or bullied, and that deeply affects children. Even I go to a lot of VR chats and we talk about empathetic VR experiences, and that's one way to look at it. But for some of the kids that I work with, some of those empathy experiences are actually trauma-inducing because we're not asking the kids what is their background before we put them in them. So we're seeing a lot of instances where we have some improvement to do. Oops, sorry, let me go back. But we also have opportunities as well. Some really things that I'm excited about is XR technologies is one of the most effective technologies I've seen as a teacher that helps kids for the future of work. So they can learn different skills, like one of the big things you see in education is social emotional learning. And those are things like decision making and conflict resolutions, and even things like career and technical education, CTE. XR provides lots of opportunities for these avenues that were traditionally difficult to get kids prepared for. Like we were saying, so I'm the founder and CEO of KaiXR, and I got into this because I thought that XR was a really good way to prepare kids for the future and make educational opportunities more accessible to them. I never wanted to have a VR company or a company in general, and I'm very transparent about that. But I got into the VR space because I felt that people were not making educational considerations that took into effect safety, that took into effect accessible outcomes, connectivity, and also inclusive experiences for kids. And without these considerations, we're furthering the digital divide. So we've seen too many things that went wrong in traditional ed tech for us not to apply those learnings to the future of what the metaverse can be. So when we do a lot of work with parents and educators. And I'm really passionate about this because when you are a teacher, you have to have a trifecta of the student, the parent, and the teacher. With XR, we leave out the parent and the teacher. So when we talk to a lot of our clients, the things that we hear are, can I even find culturally relevant content for my kids? Maybe even things like, what if the kids can't afford headsets? Should they even have headsets? What age should they have headsets? Or even, by letting my kid be in XR, are you collecting my child's data? And the parents have nobody to talk to about these things. So one of the big things that I'll even shout out Daryl taking photos here, he's our head of customer success, and we have him in place because parents have nobody to talk to. So we make sure they have somebody to call to answer these questions, and that makes them more comfortable to actually go into metaverse technologies. A lot of these things that we're talking about, we can't afford for them to be afterthoughts when designing for children in the metaverse. So some considerations that we take into account for, especially at KaiXR, is we do a lot around diversity and inclusion. If you're making VR for children, we have to consider accessibility and the digital divide. What about identity protection? These are big things that parents keep asking us about. Privacy, safety and security, and even ethics and standards. From the conversations I've sat through at AWE, it's been really mind-blowing to me that I've heard lots of people talk about tech to prevent sexual harassment in VR, but I haven't heard too many conversations about how people should be behaving in XR and how we're modeling that. With kids, as being a teacher, we have to go over character traits with kids and how to be good digital citizens. But instead, I hear we go straight to the tech. And these are things that are pedagogy that we should be doing already with kids. And by having those conversations, we're making the metaverse safe for everybody because, spoiler alert, these kids become adults very fast. Some other things that we talked about, just considerations for those who are in making things in the metaverse. We also think about safety, societal impacts. Like I was saying, a lot of these empathy things, I always am the Debbie Downer in the room. I'll give you an example. People love to try to put me in homelessness experiences so I can experience what homelessness is. They never asked me was I homeless, and I was when I was a kid. So when you put me in these experiences, I can vocalize, I'm not okay with that. These kids can't. So I have kids in the classroom who are deeply disturbed, and I have to figure out what's happening with them. And that's because these considerations are not being considered when we do a lot of XR technologies. And a lot of this also is equitable tech. As a WebXR company, we make sure that whatever device you have, smartphone, tablet, laptop, you can still have a pathway to XR technology. I think this is my last slide, wrapping up. So for a lot of people we work with, we make sure that when you are creating for the metaverse, that we take some time to pause and think about the risk associated with content, with commerce, and especially with contact. One of the things that we also see a lot of is that kids are in a lot of spaces that are not designed for them. And their parents don't know this because they're not the digital natives. This is why we're talking about parents. They don't know what's happening in the headset. So also just having the conversation with kids. One of the things I like about working with Kavya is we talked about having a kid council. Kids should also be included in what happens in the future of the metaverse. Once again, they turn into adults very fast. So having that input is really important for designing in the metaverse.
Thank you, Kai. And I mean, lived experiences are so important. Just like, somebody introduced you to like the homelessness type experience. Somebody had put me into this experience called baby hands. And until that moment, I actually didn't know that there was some kind of traumatic something. And like 30 seconds in, I was just not okay with it.
Yeah.
So I know there's something there to discuss with my therapist at some point. But that's the thing, you don't know what you're exposing your children to. But before I move into the solution piece of it, I also want to say there is so much more data that is being collected through these devices. These devices has powerful sensors. So a term that Xrsi introduces to understand it all the way from the regulatory perspective is to regulate this type of data because it's inevitably getting collected. I want to just reiterate our mission is to build safety and inclusion, and these are some of the pillars that we're focusing on. Today, I'm really proud to even announce that we've taken the step to segment child safety into its own program, and together with lots of different governmental organizations, we're building this framework. So if you're working in child safety domain, you've been holding that 13 plus as like the holy grail, like 13 plus checkbox, and you're good to play around with children's future. That can no longer be the case because these considerations are already in the draft in California proposal for privacy for children. We are working with a lot of senators, House of Representatives who are literally looking to adopt. These considerations come from Information Commissioner Officer in the UK, age-appropriated design considerations. So we're verbatim adopting that, including another consideration. This is Julie Inman Grant, who has been a fierce advocate for children's safety, and they have a toolkit for safety by design. So those considerations are verbatim adopted in the frameworks that we're building. So today, take this moment to just reflect on what we are doing this. We are doing this for children, for our next generation. Think about what can you do. If you know a child, a parent, a student, a social civic organization, a regulator, a big tech, urge them to connect with us because this work has barely just begun. It's probably going to take us 2 to 3 years to complete this framework that takes into account the neurocognitive developmental processes, the medical aspect of what happens to children at the brain level. And that's why this work is so important. Please ask anyone that you know who would care to reach out to us. And I thank you all for just paying attention, giving your time to listen to this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I learned so much more about you guys. Every time I hear you speak, I feel like I learn how much more amazing you are every time. It's incredible, the people that are here today, so thank you so much for putting this together. I would love to ask the audience to ask any questions that are on their mind right here.
Hey there. Thank you so much for the talk. I'm interested, like, in these sort of steps that parents can take to introduce a level of control. I hesitate to say that as someone who grew up as like a little punk rock kid as a teenager, but what parents can do. I mean, we're talking about, it's going to be the Quest 2, right? This is the cheapest. This is the most available. When parents get the Quest 2, what can they introduce for control? And I think it's been promised, but it's not quite there as far as my own investigations on the headset. So when I've been talking to a parent, what I told them to do is sort of off use, which is don't give Johnny an unopened Quest 2. Use your Facebook account, put your lock on it, lock apps, sync it with Oculus app, watch what they're doing in the moment, all this stuff. So is that contradictory to how the company that makes the Quest 2 wants the platform to be used? And if there's partnerships with an organization, how do you manage that? How do you have a sort of feedback loop between the advice that we're giving to parents directly and to the company in order to hurry up with the technology itself?
It's a really, really important and good question. Thank you, Emmy. I want to let Kai take that in terms of, because she is working so closely with children, is a perfect person what to tell the parents, but then I would add my bits to it. Please.
Yeah, I will say that one of my pet peeves for working in this space is that we throw out traditional pedagogy or things that work before we bring the tech in. The tech is one tool. So what we do for a lot of the kids is we don't even start them at an Oculus Quest. We actually start them just talking about what is this technology, how you should be behaving in this technology. We may even start them with a tablet and have them doing that first. And then they have to kind of graduate into this. And we do time limits on things like that. So that may not be, if the incentive is having a kid in a headset for long periods of time, we don't do that for our company. And all of our experiences, for example, at Kai Xrsi, they're about 5 minutes and under. And that's because we want kids to come out of the headset and talk to us about what they're seeing. So we do a lot of checking in with kids and things like that. That's how we do it. I don't want to talk about any other companies and things like that. And I will also say one thing that we have for the company is we have 100+ kid-friendly, teacher-approved VR experiences. That's so kids can roam freely on our site and not have to worry about, like if you're a teacher, like one of your worst fears is YouTube. No offense to Google, but you'll click on one video and the next one, your whole classroom goes under. So we make sure that we have that safe space for kids to roam and use the technology and kind of scaffold them into the technology, if you will.
Thank you, Kai. And just want to add to it. So if you go to xrsi.org/publications, you will see a couple of infographics. One is directed to children, one is directed to parents. And at that point, we don't have the age-appropriate design code applied, so we are really just giving the advice like, hey, 13 plus, don't put your children under 13, because that's the manufacturing guidance. Now I want to address Emmy's other question. How do you take this advice and put it in the hands of manufacturers, people who are designing Quest and whatnot? So I want to bring back some memory from AWE 2020. It was online session, and I still have those recordings because I'm so proud of it. Some of our advisors, including myself, we literally raised concerns about age-appropriate content and children's concerns. As a result, and I'm really glad that one of the policy person from Meta is here, is really like, they listened to it. And I think this was just about 3-4 months ago. They updated some of those parental guidance. So it's not even a back channel. I mean, I used to really kind of shy away from admitting that we are really providing all these concerns back to them. I don't anymore, because this is so important. And that Meta does try to work across the industry, listen to civic organizations like Xrsi. So we've really just like taken the stance, taken all this verbatim feedback coming from children, parents, all of this, and then as we develop the framework, we're gonna urge all these big tech organizations that have a stake in the game for children to come sit at that table and make those decisions together. Because, just building a framework, who cares, It needs to be implemented within the ecosystem. So it's happening. It's not happening fast enough. Otherwise, there wouldn't be those headlines that I started with. And that's the thing. We want to shift the industry's mindset from protection to prevention. In the immersive domain, there should not be a management of risk. There should be prevention of harm. You cannot expose children to harmful content. That's a red line that any content producer should not cross. And if you do, you should be shamed for it or even be penalized. So I think looking at that in the horizon, we'll get somewhere with it. But Emmy, thank you for that question, because it's really important to work with those people who have the control to make things better.
Little quick question for Kai. I'm really curious, working with children, how you're managing kind of behavioral remediation, or if you're seeing any like new behaviors once they're in headset. That you mentioned some trauma-informed responses that you've seen, but is there anything else in terms of just the day-to-day behavioral management of teaching that's changed for you?
Yeah, I will say that for us, we put so much effort into working with the kids before they even get into the headset. And we also limit a lot of the social VR experiences. I always think about social VR like being in a playground. So a lot of times, like, you would never drop a kid off in a playground and leave them, right? So when we drop them off in these social worlds, like, what do we do? So if usually I may be in there monitoring with them sometimes to make sure, or I may model behavior, or we just have them in there for short amounts of time. But we make sure that we find these spaces where the kids will be safe. And then whether it's, one thing I really want to stress is before they go into the headset and after they come out the headset, we talk to them. We have discussions. We talk about what should be doing better and what shouldn't. I also want to stress that this is not all up to us. We also ask the kids, what do you want to see? What didn't feel good for you? If you could change this, what would you do? And I take it really, I'm very passionate about, we're literally building the next generation of metaverse creators. And as long as we help them make decisions, then we'll all eventually get to the metaverse that we deserve.
Yeah, and I want to adopt all of her lived experiences and all of your advisors' lived experiences, and that's why I was like begging you to become Xrsi advisor. So one thing that's going to happen is at the moment, we don't have those experiences where we can ask children, but as we develop this framework, we'll lean on the Children Advisory Council that E-Safety Commissioner has put together. These are children that will be exposed to controlled circumstances in a very, very carefully thoughtful environment. And Laura, you are our advisors. I will lean on your experiences, what could potentially be triggering, not, and how should we create those guidelines before we expose children, even in these controlled environments, to learn from their experiences. I'm just grateful that you all are here asking all these questions and producing answers that could go back into building this framework together with, at least we have commitment from 2 major governments to support the initiative. And just yesterday, there is an initiative that was announced for children safety, which involves several other governments. And I'm hoping, because E-Safety Commissioner is involved in that, we'll also adopt some of the things that we're working on. So really hopeful things, but can't do without you all. So please help spread the word and get involved.
Thank you so much. This is a great talk.
Thank you.